Could the Dallas Cowboys actually consider blowing things up if they have another losing season? We'll break it down next.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. Joining me today, as always, is Landon McCool. You can follow him on Twitter at McCoolBCB. And on today's show, we are answering your Twitter questions, and we've got some really good ones, including this first one from George. He wants to know, if the Cowboys don't make a real push or they don't make the playoffs, do you think they could consider blowing up the roster and rebuilding in 2026, Landon?
I think 2026 would be tough to kind of try to do it that year. I mean, just because you still got a lot of Dak money on a very, very new contract. I think and I also think it depends on what we're talking about, right?
Like, well, let's talk about that. What kind of? I'm assuming he means blow it up, like, hey, tear this thing all the way down to the studs and then start over, right? Does that mean getting rid of Dak and getting rid of like CeeDee Lamb?
Well, let's go with his scenario, right? Like they don't make the playoffs, or listen, I mean, in those situations where Dak they don't make the playoffs, like is that because Dak didn't play for 8 games, or is that because Dak played a majority of the games and played poorly? And I think that kind of matters. Now we can kind of dissect it both ways. If they want to keep Dak and they want to kind of just blow things up, around him, I mean, it wouldn't really be that hard because I mean, most everything is kind of been blown up recently, and nothing's really committed to outside of CeeDee Lamb, and Micah, potentially Micah Parsons if they sign him at that point. I think those two guys would be pretty difficult to get rid of. I think it really all depends on kind of what you're talking about, because even kind of stripping it down to the studs means potentially trading away top players for draft picks. But a lot of your top players, like you're kind of just getting through the process of signing them to long-term deals.
Yeah, it's funny because this team does not have a lot of older players, right? So it doesn't feel like a team that's gone all in and now they're just going to have to kind of reap what they sow. Like, look at the offense, right? Your oldest player, your oldest starter is Dak Prescott. The next oldest starter on your team on offense is Terrence Steele at 28. You've got some other guys like Will Greer, Calvin Harmon, Dakota Shepley. Like those guys are like between 28 and 30. They don't really count, right? So the majority of your rosters between the ages of 22 and 27 on offense. And then on defense, it's the same way. Like your oldest player on defense is Dante Fowler. He's on a 1-year deal. Donovan Wilson, he's on the last year of his contract. Solomon Thomas is 29. He's on a 1-year contract. Malik Hooker on a 1-year contract. He's 29. Like this is a very, very young team, and all those, aging assets, they're all free agents next year. So I understand the question. Like, do you start maybe trying to trade away some of these better, younger players for more assets and draft picks? Maybe, but who are those players that you're trading away?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think the only thing that kind of qualifies for what this scenario that's being laid out is trying to find a way to move off of Dak Prescott, and I just don't know. Like, it would have to be a very specific scenario, and even then, like, there's like a formula of like how bad could Dak be while still being wanted by another team to make a trade, because otherwise you're not going to cut him because he's going to, you probably aren't going to cut him because he's going to cost you so much money anyways. I think the most likely scenario is that if the Cowboys have another disappointing season this year, that likely they're just going to try to have to run it back at least one more year with Dak Prescott, because like you said, otherwise, like, all the moves that they would have done, they probably were going to do if they had a successful season in a lot of ways. And I think that there isn't really a way to blow it up any further other than refiring your head coach and, getting another new defensive coordinator. And obviously at some point Dak Prescott is going to be included that if you're truly trying to blow up this team.
Yeah, we should also mention Dak has a no trade clause, so that would complicate things even further, right? He's going to only want to go to a situation. Again, I think there are other ways to blow it up. And actually, what I think would be the most likely scenario is you move on from all those guys that are on 1-year deals, your Donovan Wilsons, Malik Hooker. And then maybe what you also do is you don't re-sign some of the young players like Jake Ferguson and Deron Bland, and you just, which is kind of what they've been doing the last couple of years anyways, but maybe you really let a lot of those guys go, stock up on the comp picks, start to try to save some money for future years. But I just don't think they are in a position where they can really tear this thing to the ground because they've got the league's highest paid quarterback. They've got one of the highest paid receivers. They're going to have the league's highest paid defender. And you can't really tear it down when you're paying those three guys that much money.
It's ironic that you're wearing an OU shirt because all my old OU buddies used to talk about how OU doesn't rebuild, they reload, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of what Dallas has always been doing. And that's honestly kind of what you're describing here too, is like, it's not truly a rebuild, right? Because like outside of like getting rid of your head coach and your quarterback, it is kind of just like reloading the pieces around the main portion of the team, because and that's not a commentary on your answer. That's a commentary on the question, because ultimately, like, there isn't a way for the Cowboys to blow this up the way that would be satisfactory for meeting the drasticness of what you're describing. And I think the only way to do it is mechanisms that aren't going to be available to this team until at least 2027 or beyond because of Dak's contract.
Well, I will say there's one other way that they could blow it up if they have a poor season, and that's the front office. Now, they're not going to move on from Jerry Jones and Stephen Jones. Like, that's not what I'm talking about here.
Yeah.
But could it, if let's say this draft class ends up not turning out to be anything, and last year's class doesn't end up being anything, and Mozzie Smith continues to struggle, maybe they feel like, hey, Will McClay, you've had a great run here, but we need to get a fresh voice in here. Hey, we've got this analytics staff that we're paying a lot of money. Let's move on. Like, that is one way that they could change things up in Dallas without actually changing the roster too much on the field. But I hesitate to think they would even do that because Jerry Jones and Stephen Jones like working with those guys.
And also, I think, for all the folks that would be calling for the head of Dak Prescott or, calling for this team to be blown up, they would probably come screaming in from off stage and go, no, not those guys. We like those guys. So
that's what, yeah.
Ultimately, we don't make change for change's sake. Like have a plan in place and replace the parts that need replacing. But right now, the guys that are the most consequential for the outcome of the Cowboys season, they're going to be here for a little bit.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like, even with a bad season, even if they go 6-11, it seems like they're just going to have to make some changes on the edges like they've been doing the last couple of years. And until we get a little bit further into the Dak contract, he gets into the mid-30s of his career, then we can start talking about them really resetting things and rebuilding things. But the Dallas Cowboys don't rebuild. It's just not what they do.
No, not at this point, certainly. No.
All right, let's talk some more about the Cowboys this offseason. What will the offense look like this year under Brian Schottenheimer compared to last year under Mike McCarthy? We will get to that next. This episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Have you ever wished managing your money felt easier? With Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're trying to grow your savings or you're planning a big purchase, Monarch Money puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is more than just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all of your accounts, all of your investments, and your spending in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you can also build your wealth. My family and I, we've been using Monarch Money for 7 or 8 months now. It's unbelievable how much money we've been able to save after getting rid of some of these small purchases that Monarch Money recommended us getting rid of. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKDOWNNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That is monarchmoney.com, code LOCKDOWNNFL for half off your first year. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen every single day. This next question comes from JJ. He wants to know, what will the offense look like this year? How will we, or what kind of differences will we see between Brian Schottenheimer and Mike McCarthy?
I think the first thing that we kind of have to remember is that the passing game is the passing offense for the last few years. I mean, honestly, it's the Dak Prescott offense, right? It's about what Dak wants to throw. Mike McCarthy and Jason Garrett and all the different head coaches and offensive Kellen Moore and all the different guys that have had input have, Linehan. They've all kind of, pulled the influence a little bit this way and that way. But ultimately, at the end of the day, they're going to run the plays that Dak likes to run and that Dak's comfortable running. You're going to see a lot of seam routes to tight end. You're going to see stop routes. You're going to see 9 routes. You're going to see deep posts. You're going to see interesting stuff from the slot with CD. Like, it's all that's still going to be the same as it was. I think where we're going to see the kind of differences is how they're lining up formationally, what they're doing before the snap, and then also separately the changes in the run game, right? Like how they've changed schematically in the run game, the mixture of the different run concepts that they're using, not so overly reliant on zone running and specifically outside zone, maybe just more kind of vertical displacement in the run game with inside zone, duo, man power schemes. You'll see more guards moving, coming across tackles, coming across formation to block guys on the edge. I'm hoping that that's where, I think that the most amount of creativity and change that we're going to see is in the run schemes. I think with the Cowboys passing attack, they've got CeeDee Lamb. They know what CeeDee Lamb does well. They're going to move him around, get him open. And then obviously with the addition of George Pickens, it's just going to accentuate drawing coverage. The addition of the run game will also have an effect on the passing game as well. So it doesn't sound like when you write it down on paper, like, maybe what I described sounds like a lot. But when you write it down on paper, it doesn't sound like a lot. But when you kind of lay it out and then kind of talk about how it all interacts with each other, I do think that, the changes that they're making around the edges are going to have a significant change on the offense. And certainly, just health and availability of your superstars and chemistry with your superstars is going to make a huge difference between last year and this year.
I think this is one of the things I'm the most excited about because we really don't know. And unlike other coaches and even like Mike McCarthy, we kind of knew what the Cowboys offense was going to look like under Mike McCarthy coming from Green Bay. A lot of shotgun looks, a lot of receivers on the field. We really don't know with Brian Schottenheimer because even though he's been the Cowboys offensive coordinator before, this has been Mike McCarthy's offense. And even when he was like in Seattle, we saw him try to let Russ cook a little bit, which is more, throwing the ball down the field. But Pete Carroll always tried to rein him in that way. So this is the first time that we get to see Brian Schottenheimer run his offense. And we just don't really know what it's going to look like. I think you're right. Like, I think it's going to be very Dak-centric, and he's going to run the things on offense that he wants to run. But do we see Dak under center more? Do we see more, inside zone? Do we see more gap stuff? Do we see them run more screens? I mean, that's something that Seattle did really well during the Pete Carroll, Brian Schottenheimer era. So I don't know. I think this is one of the real mysteries that we won't really know until we get to like week 1, and it's all unveiled on that Thursday night football game. But I'm excited to see how different it really could be.
Yeah, I think the under center thing is an interesting kind of fulcrum on this whole thing to discuss because Dak clearly has a preference to operate out of the shotgun, and I think that's detrimental to the run game. Operating like that is it's just it's problematic in having a diverse run game, right? And I'm wondering if...
Can you explain that really quickly? Just maybe the people that don't understand why.
It's just because your angle of attack, the ability to kind of hide, the to be actually running the football. All of that can be kind of a lot more easily gleaned from the shotgun. And it's a lot simpler when you have a quarterback who's under center, who can, turn around, toss the ball. He can turn around, hand off the ball. All the gaps on either side of him are available. The running back is usually behind him, which doesn't kind of indicate what, the power of where they're going to go. So
I'll give you another one.
Yeah,
just
please,
a really
please.
easy visual. Think about a running back in shotgun. When they're getting the ball, they're usually stationary, right? Then they've got to accelerate, right? But if you're under center the quarterback is tossing the ball to the running back or they're handing it off, the running back is already in motion. He's already starting to gain speed. So it's easier to run downhill out under center compared to in shotgun.
Yeah, and I just think it doesn't limit the concepts as well, like that you can run. That some concepts just can't be run very well from shotgun. So, anyways, I think that's going to be an interesting conversation that I think Dak is going to have with Schottenheimer about preference versus what's best for the team. And I actually think that Schottenheimer, because Dak is kind of integral in getting him hired specifically, I wonder if Schottenheimer might have more say here. Well, not say, obviously, because he's the head coach, but like he might be able to convince Dak a little bit better than McCarthy that this is probably better for the team. And this is what you need to do a little bit more in order to kind of create a positive offensive atmosphere that you're going to benefit from. So I do think that that's an interesting conversation and part of the push and pull that's going to need to happen between what's Dak friendly and what, necessarily is good for the team.
So I was watching some 2016 Dak Prescott for a project that I'm working on. And it's shocking to see how frequently they were under center. And I mean, obviously the offensive line was really good. That was peak Ezekiel Elliott, but the whole offense seemed to function very well. My question for you, Landon, is now that we're going into year 10 for Dak, you need some mobility if you're going to be running some of those, play action boot, because that's sometimes a long stretch play. If you're going to run outside zone, I don't know how much outside zone they're going to run, but it also takes more athleticism to run play action and stuff. Does Dak still have that at this stage of his career?
I'm sorry. Did you not see the pictures from this weekend where Dak?
I just wanted to ask. I just wanted to.
Well, I mean, no, it's obviously it's a legitimate question. I mean,
because there's like Peyton Manning got to a stage in his career where he couldn't play under center anymore, and that's why Denver had to use the pistol because the athleticism was just gone.
Peyton Manning was a different athlete than Dak Prescott.
Yeah,
fair to Dak Prescott.
I agree.
And I think that's what I think that's the answer to this question too. Is that I think that Dak is athletic enough. Look. Dak isn't one of these quarterbacks that you're running the football consistently, or what I'm saying. Like we all readily admit that, but he certainly is still athletic enough to handle being under center, getting out there and handing the ball off when needed. Like and maybe that's also part of the reason he's been kind of getting into all the extra shape is that he knows, hey, if I'm going to be playing under center to kind of help this running game, that means I need to be on the move a little bit more. That doesn't mean that means I'm going to be, pulling the ball and running it.
No, but just more boots and stuff like that, where he's going to be throwing on the run.
That's right. And I think that's going to provide a ton more opportunity, and it's going to open things up a lot more. Sometimes it could just get stale when you're leaning too far into a player's preference. Sometimes you kind of need to pull it back a little bit and blend it in with what's best for the team, what's best for the running game, which ultimately is also what's best for Dak Prescott.
I just had to ask. I mean, I know there's some people that are worried about that. I agree with you. I don't think he's going to be a threat as a runner that much anymore at this stage of his career, even though I saw some of the picks. I just think he's trying to get into better shape so he can execute the play actions better. He can get to his spots a little bit quicker. That's all.
He's in a well above average athlete for a 32-year-old quarterback. Let's go there. Like he's a very good athlete for a 32-year-old quarterback, pocket passing quarterback, right?
Yeah.
So we don't need to worry about that necessarily.
All right, let's talk more about Dak because apparently over the last 2 weeks, everybody wants to know what's Dak Prescott's legacy. I've been avoiding this conversation forever now, but let's do it. Let's talk about Dak Prescott's legacy next. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen every single day. For your second listen, check out the Locked On NFL Scouting Show. As training camps get closer and moves are being made, host Kyle Krabs and Joe Marino will make you the most informed NFL fan this offseason. Find Locked On NFL Scouting on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. All right, Landon, let's talk Dak legacy. This question is from Evan, longtime listener. He's been asking me to do it for a while. He said, all right, fine, let's do it. Legacy talk. Where does Dak rank for you guys for Dallas QBs, and what would a Super Bowl do to change that ranking?
I mean, this is a pretty straightforward question and a pretty straightforward answer. First of all, I think you have to rank quarterbacks by tiers. I mean, I know somebody who may be doing something very different than that, but I just think that it's so tough to kind of parse these guys, and God help anyone who is. And so for me, like, the tier that he belongs in is the same tier that I would put Tony Romo and Danny White, right? Like, I think the three of them are firmly in that top tier, just beneath Aikman and Staubach. And I think, outside of that, like, the rest of the folks kind of fall into the tiers below that. But I think that there's pretty clearly two groups of good Dallas quarterbacks. The elite tier, the Hall of Famers, and then the Hall of Very Good. And I think the answer to your question is, what would be the difference to get you? I mean, win the Super Bowl, and then you get into the other one. I honestly think for Dak, one Super Bowl would do, like, for me to put him in that other tier, even though other guys won multiple. I totally get that. That was a different era. I think his performance in his career as a Cowboy, combined with that one Super Bowl, I think it puts him in that tier.
That's where he's at for me. If you want to know where he's ranked all time, I have him 66, actually. I've been, like I said, working on quarterback. It's kind of crazy how similar Tony Romo and Dak Prescott's careers have been, kind of like up into this point with injuries. Both of them have had MVP caliber seasons before. Dak's was in 2023. Romo's was in 2014. Both came up just a couple votes short of winning that. But neither of them have gotten past round 2 of the playoffs. Both of them have exactly 2 playoff wins so far to their careers. It's wild. So yeah, they're in that tier. Maybe I think some older Cowboy fans maybe would put Danny White still slightly ahead of those guys, because he did get them to multiple NFC Championship games. He was also an awesome punter, which we can't forget. But my question for you is, who's the 6th best quarterback all time in Cowboys history, if those are your top 5?
That's a good question. I mean,
I guess it probably would be Don Meredith, right?
I mean,
he'd be higher than that. Yeah.
Meredith is the fair question, just because of for legacy reasons, and for, obviously he was a very, very good quarterback. I just didn't, I never considered him like in that tier. Just, that tier that Romo and Danny and Dak all exist in, like, it got created above his head, I think, at a certain point, because of their performance. So I think it's Don, and then it's Quincy, probably. I guess. I mean, I don't really. I can't, like. Who else would be next, in line? I think everyone has a very kind of.
I mean,
Quincy
you could put Craig
Carter
Morton in that. What about Craig Morton?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, again, like, what are we ranking them on? Because I think that the game was played very differently when Craig Morton was the quarterback for the Cowboys. So, which is kind of the problem with Don, right? It's like, it's just a very different sport at this point, So
I do want to ask one more Dak question before we head out.
Yeah.
How much, and again, legacy talk is so ridiculous. I just want to mention how absurd this is. But how much do you think Dak Prescott, being the NFL's highest paid quarterback, we're going on year 2 of it now, could impact his legacy? Like, do you think that's what people will remember the most about Dak by the time he retires, is that, hey, he was the highest paid quarterback in the league for multiple years, and that's kind of the height of his achievements?
I hope not. I mean, I don't know. I don't think of it like that. I don't look back and think, about players like and like how they're ranked in the money necessarily. But I guess the people that track that kind of thing, like they probably will. I mean, like because
It's really unfortunate that way. Like he just happened he played it better than any other quarterback has played it, right?
Yeah, for sure. Or sure. I mean, he created an absurd amount of leverage. He was in such a specific scenario because of everything that happened with the way he came into the league, and so it was just a kind of a timing thing, but also, yeah, I mean, everything that's special about Dak Prescott that we love, not all of it is on the field. Some of it is who he is as a person, and frankly, how he handled that whole situation was really deft. And on top of that, like, it was really important for the other players in the league, and I think so there's other parts of Dak Prescott that, he hasn't really shown out on the field necessarily the way that we see him off the field, and what an incredible person he is off the field. And if he can match what that is, then I think, he's going to have an incredible legacy at that point.
Yeah, I do think this is a big year for Dak, because if he can put together a season like he did, let's say in 2021 or 2023, and even if the Cowboys don't do a lot of damage in the postseason, just having another one of those years where it's 30-something touchdowns and under double-digit interceptions, I think you're just starting to talk about a different caliber of quarterback, somebody who has been pretty doggone elite for 7, 8, 9 years of his career. But unfortunately, with a bad season or another injury-filled season, now people are going to think about him as, hey, this is the quarterback that was really good that couldn't stay healthy, kind of the way that we think about Tony Romo the last 4 or 5 years.
If he's a winner, he's an inspiring, incredible human who overcame the odds to win the Super Bowl. If he doesn't win it, he's the guy that came up just short, and he falls into that unfortunate category.
All right, that is it for today's show. We want to thank you for making Locked On Cowboys your first listen every single day. On tomorrow's show, we're going to talk about the tight end position for the Cowboys going into training camp. Make sure you guys tune in for that. Follow Landon on Twitter at McCoolBCB. I'm at Marcus_Mosher. Go follow the Locked On Cowboys podcast wherever you get your podcasts. We are free and available on all platforms, and we will see you right back here tomorrow.